In every story, there's a secret, and in every secret, a story. He lost, Colony OF, Roanoke. History remembers kings. It remembers wars. It remembers the rise and fall of empires. But sometimes, history encounters something it cannot explain. A mystery so complete that even centuries later, the answers remain hidden. Tonight, we open a file buried deep within the archive. A file untouched by time. A file containing one of the greatest disappearances in human history. The year was 1587. More than 100 men, women, and children crossed the Atlantic Ocean. They came seeking a future, a new beginning, a place where they could build a life of their own. The destination was a remote island, far from England, far from safety, far from everything they had ever known. They named it Roanoke. At first, the colony seemed hopeful. Homes were built, children played, families worked together, and for a brief moment, it appeared that their dream might survive. But history had other plans, because 3 years later, every single person would vanish, without a battle, without a warning, without a trace. He lost, Colony OF, Roanoke. Part 2. For a short time, Roanoke survived. The settlers worked from sunrise until darkness swallowed the island. Trees were cut, homes were strengthened, fields were planted, and each morning, the colony looked a little more like the future they had imagined. But survival in the New World was never guaranteed. Food was becoming scarce. The soil was unfamiliar. The seasons behaved differently than expected, and the wilderness surrounding the colony seemed endless. Beyond the safety of the settlement, there were forests so dense that sunlight struggled to reach the ground. The settlers often spoke of strange sounds echoing between the trees, branches snapping, distant cries, footsteps where no one should have been. At first, these stories were dismissed as fear. Fear was common in a land no one truly understood, but then supplies began to run low. The hunters returned with less game. Fishing became unreliable, and anxiety spread through the settlement. The colonists knew they needed help. Without supplies from England, their future was uncertain. Their leader, John White, faced an impossible decision. If he stayed, the colony might starve. If he left, he would be abandoning more than 100 people. Among them, his own daughter and his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. John White promised he would return quickly. He promised he would bring food, tools, supplies, anything the colony needed to survive. No one knew those promises would become history's greatest tragedy. As his ship disappeared beyond the horizon, many settlers stood silently on the shore, watching, waiting, believing they would see him again within months. They had no reason to think otherwise. None of them knew. They were watching the last normal day Roanoke would ever experience. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. No ship appeared. No sails emerged from the horizon. No rescue came. And somewhere beyond the ocean, John White was trapped. War between England and Spain had erupted. Ships were seized. Resources were redirected. And every attempt to return to Roanoke was delayed. The colony was completely alone, cut off from the world, abandoned by circumstances no one could control. And as the years passed, the mystery began. Part 4. Night had fallen over Roanoke, and with it came a silence unlike anything the settlers had known before. The forest no longer sounded alive. No birds, no insects, no distant calls, only silence, an unnatural silence. Some settlers claimed they had heard whispers carried by the wind. Others spoke of strange movements between the trees. But fear had become common on the island, and most chose to ignore what they could not explain. Then something changed. Hunters began returning with empty hands. The fish became scarce, and every passing day seemed heavier than the one before. People slept less. Conversations became quieter, and smiles slowly disappeared from the colony. One woman began recording unusual events inside her journal. Strange sounds, missing tools, unfamiliar tracks near the forest, shadows she could not explain. At first, they were dismissed as imagination, but the entries continued, night after night, page after page. Then came the storm. Violent winds, relentless rain, thunder shaking the earth itself. Families gathered together inside their homes, waiting, praying, hoping. And somewhere beyond the walls of the colony, something remained hidden, watching, waiting. When morning finally arrived, Roanoke still stood. The homes remained. The fences remained. Life continued. Yet something invisible had changed. No one knew it then. But the final chapter of Roanoke had already begun. Part 5. Years passed. Not weeks. Not months. Years. And somewhere beyond the Atlantic Ocean, John White was still trying to return. But war had consumed England. Ships were needed elsewhere. And Roanoke slowly faded from everyone's attention. Everyone, except John White. For 3 long years, he carried the weight of a promise he could not keep. His daughter remained on that island. His granddaughter, Virginia Dare, remained on that island. More than 100 souls remained on that island. And then, in the summer of 1590, John White finally returned. As the ship approached Roanoke, something immediately felt wrong. No smoke rose from the chimneys. No voices echoed through the trees. No movement could be seen. Only silence. An endless, unnatural silence. The settlers should have rushed to the shore. Children should have been playing. Someone should have been waiting. But no one came. No one. John White stepped onto the island and found nothing. The homes still stood. The fences remained. Tools lay abandoned. But the people were gone. Every man, every woman, every child, gone. Without a body, without a struggle, without a trace. It was as though the entire colony had simply ceased to exist. And then, they found something. A single word. Carved into wood. CROATOAN. Nothing more. No explanation. No message. No warning. Only one word. CROATOAN. More than 400 years later, the mystery remains, and history still searches for an answer. But perhaps some stories were never meant to be fully understood. Part 6. For more than 4 centuries, people have searched for answers. And yet, Roanoke refuses to surrender its secrets. Some believe the settlers joined friendly tribes. Others believe starvation forced them to abandon the colony. Some speak of disease. Others speak of war. And some whisper of darker possibilities. But no bodies were found. No graves were discovered. No signs of battle remained. Nothing. As though more than 100 people had simply vanished from history. The word CROATOAN became the center of countless theories. A clue. A warning. Or perhaps a message left behind. Historians still debate its meaning. Archaeologists continue searching. And even today, new discoveries raise new questions. But every answer seems to create another mystery. Perhaps the truth was lost long ago. Or perhaps the truth survived, hidden somewhere beyond the pages of history. Because sometimes history remembers kings. It remembers wars. It remembers empires. But every now and then, history encounters something it cannot explain. Something that refuses to disappear. Something that refuses to be forgotten. And somewhere, beneath the dust of centuries, Roanoke still waits, waiting for the day its story is finally understood. Until then, the lost colony remains one of history's greatest mysteries. And perhaps that is exactly how history intended it to be. The file closes, but the mystery remains forever.